Oh, happy Monday, everyone. You're in great company. I'm Ray Bonney, and with you for the next hour. My show today, as always, is about people, recognising that it really is okay to not be okay, so turn up your dial. Now, we've fast-tracked right into the 23rd day of October, and that means if you go to your Christmas clock, I was actually going to tell you how many days it is to Christmas, but I really don't care because every day is like Christmas here. But today we're focusing on the legal profession, the extreme and relentless pressure on the human condition around billable hours, vicarious trauma and social pressures. The legal profession is overrepresented when it comes to mental illness, and senior legal figures acknowledge a natural correlation between the traits that make a good lawyer and those that might lead to mental health problems. My guest today is an absolute expert, pioneer and advocate around what can be done to minimise these risks. Demetrio Zima is the founder and director of Law Squared, a specialised commercial law and litigation firm focused on working with entrepreneurs and startups. His belief is that the traditional law firm model is ill-suited to the needs of entrepreneurs. Demetrio founded legal practice startup Law Squared, determined to offer a better client and employee experience. And since launching Out of Cluster, a co-working space in central Melbourne, in March back in 2016, this was Demetrio's sixth business, and he's also been named Australia's most innovative law firm by the Huffington Post and grown to a team of 11 people across offices in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. In addition, he was named one of LexisNexis 2016 Legal Innovation Index winners, and more recently has been shortlisted as a finalist for the top 10 rising stars, which will be announced during next month's Victorian Legal Awards, as well as being the director of Law Squared. Demetrio is an active participant in the not-for-profit community as director for the Centre of Multicultural Youth, board subcommittee member of VicDef and co-founder of Not Now Then When Foundation. Geez, Demetrio, how did you ever find time to come on my show today?
It's always about prioritising time.
Can you just give me a breather, please? Welcome. Now, we met back in 2014.
We did.
For those of you who've just tuned in, I'm also a very passionate ambassador for Beyond Blue, and that's how we did meet.
Yeah.
When we were doing a lot of work around, what we've just discussed around the prevalence of mental health issues in the workplace, in the legal profession.
Indeed. Yeah, that's right. I can't believe it's been so long.
I know, you've grown up. You told me you just turned 30 as well.
I know, I have just turned 30. Wow.
We're gonna get that into a bit, fumbling my words now. Get into that a little later in the show. But
sounds good.
Since we connected, our first discussion was around how can we elicit change? How can we, start really, really focusing on why so many people die from suicide in the legal profession? And there's some very obvious reasons, but you back then were working in a commercial law firm.
Yeah, it was.
You would have been, let me do my maths, maybe 26 at the time. Yeah. You have not changed today, by the way. Now, you connected with me, so can you remember back then why?
Yeah, absolutely. I recall, I suppose you hit a certain point in your career, so often around 2-3 years post your admission, you've been a lawyer, and I certainly, a lot of my friends and colleagues all felt in a similar position of like, what have we got ourselves into? And whilst we're all no doubt appreciative of law firm experience that we receive, it's also kind of that real reality about what it's like to work in a law firm, what the expectations are, both internally but also externally. And I remember that the partner I was working with at the time, we were both really interested and passionate about kind of changing that mindset and how it would be for lawyers to actually engage in a better way, but also for law firms to operate in a much better way to really harness and encapsulate what those lawyers are trying to achieve. And so I recall you doing some great stuff with Beyond Blue at the time and thought, let's connect and see what we can do.
Fantastic. Yeah. And law wasn't your first choice either, was it?
No, law was not my first choice. In fact, I never really wanted to be a lawyer at all.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so finished high school and I thought, well, I want to be a diplomat. That's what I'm going to be. It's kind of...
Where did you go to high school?
I went to a high school called Mowbray College. It was Western Melbourne. It was an independent school which has unfortunately since gone into insolvency.
Did you have something to do with that?
That's a whole other story. But that aside, it was quite a well-known, quite well-established independent school out of the west of Melbourne, and finished that and was college captain for that year. And I was like, right, what am I going to achieve and what do I want to do? And negotiating UN treaties and being a part of the Australian diplomatic corps was something that was really exciting to me. I don't know why, but something that I always was driven by. So I applied for Bachelor of International Relations at the time, and I thought, well, I shouldn't just do that. I should also do a law degree. So I did 4 years of law and international relations.
Why was that? You thought because it gives you much better infrastructure to
gives
do
you something
that
else,
UN work?
yeah. And what if I don't get in? Then what do I do? I've done all this time in international relations, and so I could, hopefully work for an NGO or head overseas. But it's all a bit pie in the sky type thinking. So.
Does any of that still resonate with you, the UN experience, and do you still have a passion for a particular issue?
Yeah, it's not so much a particular issue. It's more about kind of the impact you can have globally, and I suppose representing Australia more broadly has always been something that I've been really excited by. I finished university in June of, let's do the math, 2010.
You went to La Trobe?
I went to La Trobe, I did.
We would have been there together.
Wow, there you
go. I think I graduated in 2010 as well.
Yeah, June 2010. And then I ended up doing an internship in Rome. So I worked for the Australian Embassy to the Holy See. And I was very fortunate to have met with the then Ambassador Tim Fischer, the Honourable Tim Fischer, who's former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Trade for many years under the Howard government, and his team at an event in Rome early that year. And I was a bit cheeky and had asked whether there'd be a position for an intern coming up later in the year, as it was around the time of the canonisation of Mary MacKillop, which is Australia's first saint. And there was a whole lot of buzz happening in Rome at that time, and the Holy See was a very small
Not like
embassy.
the buzz there is these days.
Yeah.
That's another story, though.
Whole nother story. But, I knew there'd be a big kind of political, numbers, if you like, going. Yes. So, at the time we had Julie Bishop came, Barnaby Joyce was there, Kevin Rudd was there. And so after a few months at the embassy, I absolutely loved it. And I was just like, yes, this was everything that, you kind of go through university thinking that an international experience would be like. And so I came back to Melbourne at the end of 2010. I thought, right, I'm going to apply for DFAT graduate program, and then I will also at the same time do my articles, what we now call traineeship. And so I'd applied for both, and I did my 6 month through Leo Cusson, which is a practical legal training here in Melbourne, and applied for DFAT, and I didn't get past the first round.
Oh.
And I was absolutely gutted.
Of course.
And then refused to ever apply again. I was so focused and I suppose certain that I would at least get past somewhere, and probably so disheartened by the process that I then thought, nah, I'm not going to do it. Let's just give law a shot.
Tell me about the process, though, because that's something that I'm very focused on when, we're recognising the human condition, how we put into process like recruitment or, application for university.
Yeah, indeed.
What was it that didn't get you in, and what did it feel like?
What did it feel like? It was pretty gut-wrenching, but when you put the numbers, I think they get about 10,000 applicants a year, and then there end up being, I think, about 50 graduates a year. So the numbers are quite vast, and you have honour students and master's students, and the calibre of individual that applies is it's outstanding. 2-3 languages. Yeah. I only had 2 to offer, English and Italian.
Well, here's a bit of a shout out to Leo Cusson Institute. You missed out. You missed out on this star. So he did it anyway without your help. We do like to give shout outs here, good and bad.
Yeah, why not?
And so then after that?
So then after that, I finished up my Leo Cusson and got admitted as a legal practitioner 23rd of August of 2011, and then was fortunate to get offered a job at a insurance litigation firm. Many of my colleagues struggled to find jobs, and there were just, even now we have the oversupply of law graduates versus the amount of law jobs generally, let alone graduate roles. And so I started as a insurance litigator, and I did insurance litigation for about 2.5-3 years. And at that point, I kind of, insurance was all I did, and litigation was all I did, and I was, I like to think, a hard worker and kind of dedicated a lot of time and effort and energy into moving up the traditional ranks of what we all aspire, with little quotation marks, for while we're at law school, to kind of hit that trajectory.
Yes.
I then got to a point in my
But
career.
insurance is such a tough space as well. It's so heartbreaking, isn't
Insurance is a really tough space, but I mean, we were focused. It was a motor vehicle, home insurance, professional indemnity, public liability type insurance work. So it was corporate work, acting for insurers. Great work, but again, kind of the same thing, right? And again, you're following that trajectory of what is expected of you as a junior lawyer to move up.
Did
the
you have
ranks.
anything in your mind that was really sort of driving you to another space away from there?
I was really just determined to make it happen. I was determined to kind of follow that trajectory because I thought that's what
To
was
make
expected.
it happen.
To make it happen. And being it was, climbing that corporate ladder of, going.
But did you
from-
have a destination? Or
No,
a
the
focus?
destination at
Yes.
the time, no, it was just kind of let's just push through and see how hard and how far you can get. And at the time, the way that you move yourself up in any of those firms is, I suppose, it's competition is rife amongst your peers, and it's not traditionally a merit-based system, but rather a time-based system. So by virtue of the time in which you spend in a firm and the amount of time you spend in the firm, including the amount of budget you hit or money that you make for the firm, will then predict your trajectory in that firm. That's just the nature of the industry.
Yes.
And I got to a point in my career as an insurance litigator, I thought I didn't want to be pigeonholed as an insurance litigator. And I had a really open and honest conversation with the partners of the firm at that time, the managing partner, who, is somebody that I still hold in very high regard and still touch base with. Because I said to him, I really want something else, and maybe commercial litigation more broadly is what I should try. Kind of hit my third year, and he said it's just not something that we do as a firm. But
Did you feel supported though in your conversation with your leader?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's always a kind of like how much money, do you want conversation? But it was actually an experience conversation for me because I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And then I did find a commercial law firm that I ended up moving to.
Is that where I met you?
Sorry?
Is that where I met you?
Yeah, that's where we met,
Yes.
indeed. And then I was there for about 2.5, 3 years before deciding that it was time to create something different and something better, and something that I thought was going to be the future of law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think my interest was sparked as well meeting you in that law firm. And we won't name them, but, just that feeling. And I know that you had a different experience being an internal person.
Yeah.
But coming from an outsider, just doing the best that they can to address the human condition in that workplace and the amount of activity that goes on, bringing external people in as well to give the experience of feeling cared for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the leaders in that organisation definitely do their very best under duress, I know, many times to do that. So it's good to see not all law firms are churn and burn.
Yeah, not all law firms are churn and burn. And I think, we often say, or I certainly say when law graduates reach out to me, what type of firm should I go to? And I say, don't worry about the firm, worry about the partner. Find a partner that you want to work with and work for, because that ultimately will dictate your experience. You can be in a law firm that has a fantastic name and reputation, but actually have a partner who doesn't care about your development, doesn't care about your mental health, doesn't care how your weekend was. And that in itself will actually really affect your work life.
Oh, and your personal life.
Yeah,
and your
absolutely.
social life. You know my daughter Rose because you've met her. Delightful thing that she's.
Absolutely.
She also works in a law firm.
Yeah.
And they're another one where, she has feelings of being valued, accepted, doesn't work extraordinary hours, but wants to when she has to.
Yeah, indeed.
Because, again,
She feels valued. Yeah.
they create that really good environment as well.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, feeling valued in any part of your life, be it personal or professional, is critical to that ultimate kind of overall well-being.
Yes. So again, in your trajectory, so you decided to go out on your own, and I know you had a bit of a few stop starts, and 6 businesses you've launched since you went out into the world.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Just kind of always had, a desire to kind of create something different.
Have they all been law firms?
No, they haven't.
Oh,
no,
right.
not at all.
Right.
They were anything but professional services. And I suppose at the time, and to give you an idea in terms of some of the mindset of lawyers at the time, it was really to get me out of being a lawyer. So, whilst I enjoy being a lawyer, I also dislike being a lawyer tremendously, and probably got to a point in my career where I was done with law. I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I didn't enjoy the hours.
What parts? Are there? Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't enjoy the hours. I didn't enjoy the kind of the expectations of budgets and file loads. And again, this is nothing unique to the firms that I've been at. It's an unfortunate it's just the business model.
What's the nature of the business?
It's just a business model
Yes.
of a law firm, of a traditional law firm. And so I suppose I hit that period in my career where I thought it's time to try and make some money outside of law to get me out of law.
Yep.
And that's ultimately what I tried to do. And, it really wasn't until one of my last businesses.
What was your first one?
My first one was a social enterprise consulting business. Couple of guys were 21 and we're just trying to make a difference. A bit optimistic. No one wanted to listen to us. Social enterprise was a very new and raw thing in Australia. We can give a shout out to Street because they were really the first, if you like, in Melbourne who were supporting, a cafe support around homeless people and did an excellent job. But the founder of that, she really was one of the first. We approached state government, federal government, local council, and whilst people like the idea of what social enterprise was, it just didn't make sense. How could a not-for-profit run its business and how could they actually make money? How can they generate a profit? And then what do they do with that profit?
Yeah.
It was just a foreign concept. And you fast forward, that was 21.
And
so
that focus was on homelessness?
No, that focus was just social enterprise generally. So it's about working with some leading not-for-profits around actually creating a social enterprise arm.
Okay.
And we did some great work with some big, large organizations, which we won't name, who actually went on to do some really great things, which I'm really proud of.
Oh,
but
so it's still generating.
it's still generated. Yeah. So, as a business, it doesn't exist anymore, but work that we did back then actually paid off. And now we have over 20,000 social enterprises in Australia. It's incredible.
Yes.
And that's not to do with us, of course, but it just shows how the mindset, I suppose, around social enterprise has changed.
That's right. I was speaking with somebody on the show a few weeks ago. I can't remember who, but we were talking about change and research and how so much research ends up not going anywhere. However, that it does have some merit because there is that initial thought or that initial piece to lead to something else.
Yeah,
so
to lead to something else.
Never
absolutely.
for naught. Just
No,
because the
that's
business
right.
doesn't.
Well, it means to go somewhere, and
Yes.
but also it taught us a whole bunch of skills that we didn't have. We were four guys who just put a bunch of money into a bank account and said, "Let's just see what happens."
At 21.
At 21, and nobody really took us seriously, and we wondered why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we bag your generation for not
I know.
getting up and doing
For
stuff.
not getting up and doing stuff. Yeah.
So what was next?
So after that, I then went into a removal business. So again, just an idea
Cannot
about
see
trying
you
to
there.
get us out. So
Can't.
we bought a van, a moving van, and we jumped onto all your usual websites to try and spruik ourselves. And we had a third person. There were three of us. We had a third person who was going to be the day-to-day person, and myself, my business partner, were just going to be the managers. And that turned out being that I would work very long hours in a law firm and then after hours go and pick up somebody's washing machine and then drop it off somewhere else, or on a weekend.
For $25.
For $25. And then on a weekend, you would do a few hours and then go out and do a small apartment move. Anyway, we quickly realized that it wasn't sustainable and sold the van and not much came of that. But again, an experience, trying to run a business, run a zero account, get that startup, trying to, manage somebody who I hadn't worked with before. I was 23 at that stage. So, a whole new learning experience. After that, the same guys who we started the first business with went into a healthy food vending machine business. And that was, we teamed up with a cafe in Melbourne who was looking to expand their business and didn't know how to expand their business. And so we proposed this idea of setting up a vending machine in office buildings. And that would allow that person to distribute food and fresh food produce twice a day to the vending machine and offer a different customer experience. So rather than having a stall, he could actually then grow his business by having an interaction with a vending machine. That went really well, and ultimately he took over the assumption of that. And then I helped support in the startup of a online tech business, which was a pay-per-bid auction business. And the technology of that is still an ongoing thing and something that was, again, a whole new learning experience. Tech was not something that I'd done before or had much experience in, but, I had some legal knowledge for support. I had some general business knowledge for support. And I suppose just had the enthusiasm and the drive to... Let's just see what happens.
It's when you went exhausted after the vending machine and after the removal.
Just keeps you going. Keeps us going. And I suppose for me, it was just another focus to keep me going. I was quite, fit then, and so I kept my mind busy by going to the gym and training and having a very good food regime, but I just needed something more than just my day-to-day law job to keep me active. And
Yes.
it was about learning, and I learned through business. I suppose one of the last businesses was a health retreat in Bali. So we
I didn't know about you, Demetria.
whilst I was prepping for the creation of Law Squared, I spent about 5 weeks in Bali. And I had two friends come over who run a very successful fitness business in Australia. And they said, why don't we just move here like a couple of times a year? Like, how do we just spend more time here? And we thought, well, the way to do that is to start a business here. A word of warning to tread with caution when starting a business in Indonesia or Bali. But that aside, we ended up taking out a lease over a brand new villa in the south of Bali and essentially white labeling fitness, Pilates, yoga, and business retreats, which was a whole lot of fun. And yeah, so that's kind of most of the trajectory of the businesses that I've been involved in.
So what happened to that?
So that was only a 12-month lease over a villa, and that is finished up.
Yes.
So our last retreat was run in April of this year, and I was like, I can't do Bali anymore.
Yeah.
It's an interesting and difficult place to run a business, but again, a really rewarding experience on having to do that. But yeah, just not something that we could carry over. We'd have to find a new location and do the whole thing again.
Yeah.
And when growing a law firm, so we currently now have 16 of us, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. It just was too much.
Yes, but we talk a lot about failure, like when things don't turn out as we expected, or when things end. We talk about failure. However, just listening to what you've been speaking about, it's success, because you just keep on learning, you keep developing, and you keep acquiring this experience.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
What an interesting life that has led you up until 30. But, I've been very much in touch with you since the launch of Law Squared, and it was you.
Yeah.
Just one person.
Just one person by themselves sitting in a co-working space.
And now?
And now there's 16 of us in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. There's a legal team of 11 and a non-legal team of 5, and it's just it's incredible.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
And also, I know these people that are populating your workspace at Law Squared, and your recruitment philosophy is obviously very, very good, because the people you've chosen are very much cut from your cloth.
Yeah, or those that understand, I suppose, the mindset of what it is we're trying to create.
Yes.
And I always say it is a very different business, and it's a very different mindset to work in a law firm, let alone to then work in what we call a new law firm. And that's not new in age, but new in philosophy and what that means.
Tell us about that. What's different?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose when we look at new law, we really are trying to change that whole experience and engagement. And so if we start internally, and something that I know we'll touch on shortly is around kind of law firms are built around the fundamental value of a billable hour or a billable unit. And so an individual's salary and their budget and their remuneration and their bonuses is solely structured around how much money they make and what their billable units or targets are for the day. And as a result of that, it triples down. So most people are on a salary of X. Their budget is often 3 to 4 times that salary, and obviously their hourly rate is commensurate to that, and it means that the entire engagement that they have with a law firm is purely based on money. It's financial. So every day you must go in there and hit a certain amount of units. Those units mean money. Every year when you have your review of how you're going, it is always a discussion that starts off with the financial component of that. So
may I interject with a question there? So it's something that's curious, and I probably could ask Rose this, but with these units of time, if you're having a discussion with a client who perhaps is quite emotional, how do you block that off? How do you manage that?
Well, you don't. Time is money, and so
time's up. It's like in America, they never say goodbye on the telephone.
Yeah, never say goodbye on the telephone.
Bang.
Yeah, or you see the thing where the lawyer is calling and it's just like, this is what I want, bye, and then they just hang up the phone because they know they're getting paid, they're getting charged for time, and so the engagement traditionally, and that's just. It's not current day law firms. It's how it's been for many years in terms of the business model is built around time. And so...
Because that gives nobody a good experience.
Unfortunately not. I mean, people have good experiences with lawyers, but it's often relating to the individual that they are dealing with
Yes.
rather than the overall experience of a law firm. And often those internally can often face that as well because they, like you just said, somebody's crying for 3 hours and you've only got an hour discussion. Well, then that's a discussion that individual needs to have with their partner around, well, how do we scope that? How do we charge that? And I've no doubt that most of them would come to the right resolution about being, well, what's the value that we really added? And so, at Law Squared, we really focus on value and not time.
Oh, well, I remember speaking to somebody from Morris Blackburn a number of years ago, one of their lawyers, and he was talking about, vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
From his position and the amount of clients that come in and they're sort of, out of 0 to 10 on the mental health scale, they're probably around 10. But during the lifetime of the case, watching these people just crumble.
Yeah.
And he said it was one of the most traumatic things ever. And he wrote quite a few articles about it as well, which I think were very powerful and got good coverage in the media. But we're going to go to a break.
Yeah.
But when we come back, I want to be talking about that topic, that's suicide prevention in the legal industry, and how you, founder of Law Squared, has pioneered so much needed change and successfully disrupted some of this stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
Like, we're just talking about billable hours and things like that really do lead to enormous pressure on the human condition. A lawyer doesn't make you I was going to say indispensable.
No,
it could be indispensable, but not indestructible.
Indestructible, absolutely not.
That was the word I was looking for. Now, Dimitri, every time this week I lead into a segue song.
Okay.
And I find a song that somehow loosely represents what we're talking about. So there were so many angles I could go to, and I couldn't really go anymore but further than lawyers in... Oh, actually, do you know what? Lawyers in Love.
Lawyers in Love.
That's a song.
It's a song.
Huey Lewis in the News. I don't actually even know what it means. And I'm joined by Dimitri Zima, founder of Law Squared, Australia's most innovative law firm, which works with some of the best entrepreneurial minds in the country. He's also a great advocate for mental health and well-being of the people who populate his space. So, lawyers, are they really in love?
Lawyers, they're really in love. I don't know. I'm still looking for a date.
I was going to ask you, are you in love?
No, definitely not in love. Not when you're traveling, in 3 cities every week. It's not really a dateable individual at the moment, I think.
Well, I was just saying to you, because we did have a visit from the divine Ken Lyons, who's coming up next on his health program, and I'm in a similar position, Dimitri, because I think I officially have about six jobs, and I travel a lot as well, and raise children, and very hard to find a date. But Ken Lyons, bang on every time.
Nice.
My best date ever. So I'm going to hit him up after the show and see where to next.
Sounds good. I might be a third wheel.
Why not? It is hard though, isn't it? We think, it's so easy when we have these flashy careers like you and I do. I was reminded the other day on radio that I work in entertainment.
Okay.
Didn't even recognise that.
You do, yeah.
I do. But where do you find time for romance? Where do you find time?
Yes, it's a good question. One that I get asked a lot, my family in particular.
Yes.
My friends also. But that's okay. I think it's one of those things where, you need to be okay that it's not okay type of thing.
Yes.
And for me, I've had a very strong focus and emphasis on growing a business. And I always said, I focus really strongly for at least the first 2 years of my business on dedicating it to that. I don't think it's fair to bring somebody into your life when, you probably necessarily can't invest that time with that person either. And I'm a big believer in investing time in people and want to be sure that I'm giving them my best self to do so. So, yeah.
That's a good quote, actually, your best self. And I think that, the expectation to be in a relationship and reproduce, whatever that might be. But, mediocrity is another thing as well, isn't it? Settling to go, well.
Just settling just because, or it's it is what it is, or because it's easy, rather than actually something that you really want or aspire to. And that's not to say it doesn't come along anyway and might change that entire mindset. But, definitely open to it. But I think you've got to be realistic and open and honest with yourself about where you are at that point.
Do you ever get lonely?
I'm a pretty active person, and I spend a lot of time with a lot of people. I'm generally not, and I'm an only child. People often say, "Oh, you don't resemble the the kind of qualities of an only child." But no, I'm not. I don't.
But when you're turning up for everybody else, you're the creator of, and people are attracted to you. So that's the context where you're spending time with people. But where do you go when you want to be the one that's taken care of?
Got a really big and beautiful family and a really big and beautiful friendship network, and they, albeit I probably haven't again invested my best self in them over the last couple of years, I've had tremendous support as well, and I think for that I'm really lucky.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's such a vulnerable space to be in as well. And when I originally met you back in the Beyond Blue days, we did a collaboration with, I think, 7 law firms called Resilience at Law, which was a DVD. And this was back in 2013 or 2014. It was produced for the law industry around bringing to light the vulnerability of people working in the space, not just lawyers, but also support people as well. And there was a number of lawyers that got up and spoke about their personal experiences, and one was Matthew Stutzel, and his story was very, very powerful about a time where he walked, he left the court, I think it was, and jumped in his car, had a plan to go on suicide, and when he got to his destination, his then partner, who became his wife, phoned him and knew that he'd had a plan and talked him around. And then Matthew went on to be an amazing advocate in the industry and did really, really great selfless work bringing these issues to light. And I was in a meeting this one day at Allen's, and I was meeting with the HR person there, and we were talking about Matthew and saying, what a great person to be able to be so brave to bring all this to light. And after the meeting, I was in my car. I'll never forget, I was on the freeway on the M1, and she phoned me and she said, you'll never believe it, but he killed himself this afternoon. And,
horrible.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get a little bit emotional
absolutely.
when I think about that, that you think, being an advocate, it doesn't make you safe. It doesn't make you bulletproof. It doesn't mean that you're over it or you've recovered. And I think in Matthew's case, I think that could have been overlooked, that because he was such a powerhouse advocate that no one was really, really looking at what was happening for him.
Yeah,
and it was just incredibly powerful. But, Resilience at Law and, the Tristan Jepson Foundation do really, really cool work around keeping people safe and recognising that you guys aren't bulletproof.
No.
How do you go about looking after people in your space?
Yeah, I suppose, and back to the point earlier around kind of removing the money element. And I think it's often overlooked and underrated just how powerful that actually is, to know that every day you're going in there, not whilst you're achieving outcomes, it's actually your own personal success within a business such as a law firm is purely based on the financial benefit that you can bring in, and that can take its toll. And I, both from my own experiences and that of all my colleagues and friends who are in law, it can take a toll because you are consistently, there is this perception about the more you build, the more successful you are. You must be seen in the office late. If the partner's there, you must be there. There was a thing that I shared on LinkedIn, just to digress for a moment, around a flowchart diagram about, I'm a lawyer, when can I go home? And the flowchart follows, and it says, are you a partner? And there's a little flowchart that says, has your partner gone home? And it flows through. And,
are all the answers just no?
Well, all the answers no, unless you were the partner. And it got the most likes and shares that I've ever had on LinkedIn. And when I shared that, I was just like, it was just, I shared it almost making light of it. But then afterwards, I thought, wow, just how impactful to have that many people engage with that post when it was such a small thing about, when can you go home? But if you put that out to think, well, actually, there are people who aren't going home. There are people who are sitting there, even if they have no work, to be seen.
Yes.
There is this perception that I'm here, I'm busy, I'm getting stuff done, I'm doing better than my colleagues.
So busy.
So busy. Yeah. Even if you are screaming for work, you are just sitting there. If you need to find things to do or over extenuate things that you've done. To digress one more, I'm sorry to do this, but when we first launched Law Squared, I put out a blog post around this fictional character called Emma, and Emma was. It was 8 o'clock. This is the bulk of the post. It was 8 o'clock and Emma had to hit 60 units a day. Emma had done 58 units for the day and she had dinner with some girlfriends at 8 o'clock in Richmond and she was trying to work out how to get out there. And so the blog post says, what did Emma do? Did Emma create 2 more units on her timesheet to hit 60 units? Or did Emma actually work an additional 2 more units to ensure that her timesheet was correct? And I made the bold statement at the end of that. I said, most people in Emma's situation has made up 2 units.
Yeah.
And so, a client somewhere has paid for an additional 2 units, or even if that amount is written off, her budget is reflective of the fact that she's done her 60 units for the day, even though she probably only did her 58 units for the day.
Yep.
But Emma in that moment just wants to go see her friends. It's 8
Yes.
o'clock. She just wants to go out, but
Yes.
she's so concerned about the fact that that she doesn't hit her targets and therefore doesn't want to get, the partner or whoever her supervisor is the next day saying, why didn't you hit your units? And the feedback that we received from the legal profession was really interesting and surprising. In fact, a number of senior partners had asked that I remove the post.
Why?
Because it was not a true reflection of the industry.
I'd say bull.
And I was taken aback by that, and I suppose it was a very early stage of Law Square, and I was like, oh, what do we do? But I was like, no, it is reflective in terms of many stories, unfortunately, that I hear. And again, not all, when I say things like this, not say that, law is bad, that's it. But it just shows that some, unfortunately, firms and some lawyers have these experiences, and they have a real effect. And so whilst the bottom of the chain the top of the chain might not feel it, certainly those within the system have at some point unfortunately gone through some of that experience. And it was about, how do we change that conversation? How do we ensure that Emma isn't sitting there going, I just want to see my friends, it's 8 o'clock, I just want to get out of the office, to thinking, actually, well, I need to get my 60 billable units before the day's end. So,
But recognising that Emma going out with her girlfriends will probably return more highly engaged the next day, more productive.
Absolutely. She'll go out refreshed, and there won't be any animosity because she wasn't late, because she was trying to hit those units. All those things, and Emma's then not having a negative experience about leaving the office and probably feeling bad, and she would have been feeling bad. I'm not picking on Emma. I don't know who she is, but she was just a fictional person.
Hello, Emma, if you're out there.
Just a fictional person that
Emma,
I
go
created.
out with your girlfriends today, please.
To go, she probably then felt really bad about that, about doing that, but it was just her way of coping with it and getting out of that, getting out to see her friends.
Yes. And, it's not only the legal profession
No,
that has
absolutely not.
This kind of approach to, presenteeism. When we're looking at absenteeism, work cover claims and presenteeism makes up for, probably 70% of non-productive behaviours.
And so that's why we go back to the original point around changing that mindset. And so what we've done is completely remove the financial element. None of our lawyers have budgets. None of our lawyers have timesheets, internally or externally. We don't record time for clients. We don't set financial KPIs for our team. Somebody says, what's your charge out rate? And we don't have one. Because that is not the basis on which our firm's metrics are run.
Yes.
A traditional law firm metrics, again, like we had said earlier, is quite simple. Your budget is X, your salary is X, your budget is 3 or 4 times that, and therefore the firm can work out its expenses, its costs, its revenue, and its partner distribution based on that.
Yeah.
Whereas we've completely flipped that and said, actually, your outcomes for the week are your targets for the week are your outcomes. What are they? What work do we have? What are those things that you need to achieve? And let's work towards them. So we'll sit down on a Monday morning, we'll scope out what those outcomes are for the end of the week, and then reassess those outcomes. So
when you engage with clients, it's very much bespoke, tailored approach.
Right.
So I'd come to you and say, hey, I want to buy a business. I've got an issue. I'm going to start up a business. And then you would say, well, if their engagement's going to be X, Y, and Z, and that will probably cost you about.
Yeah, why? It'll cost you why. And that's the other thing about a fixed fee certainty.
Yes.
We were building the assumptions based on that conversation, and then as a business owner, as an individual, what that's going to cost you. You can budget it accordingly, and we know as well. So whether that takes us 3 lawyers in 10 hours or it takes 1 lawyer in 5 hours, what that value that you're receiving, and we know that as well, and it's very clear.
Very transparent, yes.
It's very transparent from the outset. And, we have to build some assumptions around those, and we explain to you early on what those assumptions are, because if things do change, then, it's natural. But it's not like, the law has changed now in Victoria around how solicitors scope, but traditionally it was, for this X piece of litigation, it will cost you between $20,000 and $50,000. What would then happen, and the number of complaints to the Legal Services Board, you can look them up, but they are large, and they're always around costs, about lawyers not relaying what those cost increases have been. So, the estimate was $20,000 to $50,000, and you get a bill for $80,000. Everybody's surprised, everybody's upset, everybody's annoyed. Even if there was a successful outcome, you're still upset, you're still annoyed because there was no transparency around those fees and what you're going to be charged.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not about the money often, is it? It's about the experience.
It's about the experience.
The feeling of not being cared for. Or I had an experience recently where I entered into a service arrangement, and to give you context, I think the estimated fee was $999, which was a lot of money, but I was good with that.
Yeah.
Ended up at $1,500.
Yeah.
And I was also okay with that. But when I got the invoice, it turned into $1,700. And I asked the question, where did the extra $200 come from?
Yeah.
And I didn't get an answer for it.
Okay.
And I felt enraged at the injustice of having the wool pulled out, or the assumption that I'm stupid and that I'm going to just stump up $200.
Yeah.
So it's not often about the money, it's about the experience. And I guess
absolutely.
that's, what I understand from Law Squared and my experience of what you guys do, is that you care.
Yeah.
You absolutely bloody care.
Well, we need to care. I mean, we're dealing with, livelihood of entrepreneurs who have gone out on a whim to create something big, or we're dealing with entrepreneurs who are negotiating very large deals, capital raising, which will make their business tick or not tick, And I know every lawyer does so, but we take a different approach in that our focus is the outcome. I say we don't sell time, we sell legal solutions. And so if I say to you, for a fee of X, we can achieve this solution or this outcome for you, then you as a business owner feel comforted by that. And so long as your experience is a positive one throughout that, then I think we've done our job.
What's been your biggest moment or biggest achievement, without naming, unless you can, of course?
I think one of our most recent achievements was actually we completed a $25 million raise for a client. So that was a huge deal, and we had a top tier law firm on the other side of that. And capital raisings, for the listeners, it often is an opportunity for equity in a business to be given up in exchange for money, which means that a business has, both working capital or growth, or is being bought out. And for this business, it was a big deal. And $25 million isn't something to sneeze at. But also, more importantly, for a firm of our size to, have done that deal, completed that deal. And actually, that's a good story. When we first met the partner who was working for the law firm on the other side, he just looked at me and he shook his head. He just, you could see the look on his face. His deal was just going to fall over. There's no way these guys can pull this deal off. And after we settled the transaction, it was a settlement that took about 2.5 hours, which was very smooth, very quick.
So you weren't sweating or anything?
No. The settlement just went through. It was just we'd done a good job, and we're really proud of the team at the end of that. And then afterwards, he actually pulled me in to a side room. He said, "Have you got a moment for a chat?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I must say, it's like I'm extremely surprised, but very pleased at the outcome." And I was just like, "Why are we surprised? I just didn't think you could do it." And so I was both offended, but also quite chuffed at the same time that he thought that we didn't have the capacity. And we've done many of those deals now. That's definitely our biggest, but it just shows that size doesn't actually mean everything, and it is about skill set and importance.
Unless you're dating, of course.
We won't then compare the legal fees that our client paid to what the other side paid for the same work, but that's definitely been our biggest proud moment. And not so much the transaction itself, but also just kind of to see that one senior partner in a very well and distinguished law firm, just mindset completely changed. And actually, he's since referred us quite a bit of work.
That's great.
Which is fantastic. And I think, again, just goes to show that,
what are the possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about mindset, and we're so unconsciously biased against these things when we see them come and go, you can't.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you and hanging out with you, because you're a you can person.
You can person,
we'll work that out later how we're going to do it. But we'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot, absolutely. And I suppose when we work with the client base they're all just trying to give it a shot.
Yes.
And so they want lawyers who are going to say, right, let's give it a shot with you. Let's not give you the barriers, but actually work out what some of those points of entry are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you just made me think then. I've not spoken with Ryan Ebert for a little while. No, it was his birthday yesterday.
Yes, it was.
And happy birthday, Ryan. If you're listening, I will give you a call later. But, he's another person like you or us that gets up and gets going. And I don't think he's quite reached 30 yet, has he?
No, he hasn't.
No.
He's under 30, but just achieved some remarkable things.
Amazing things through health. What's his business called? Health something. Anyway, I'll get him back on and we'll talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. But you did turn 30.
I did.
Recently. And in the last few minutes of the show, I just want to pay homage to that. And, I'd sing, but I won't. But you said it was quite challenging for you.
Yeah, I was saying that I had quite a bit of anxiety around turning 30, and I suppose I had the expectation that I had set myself for 30, I didn't think I'd quite met by 30.
Gee, you're hard. You're very hard.
I was really hard on myself, and I really wasn't ready to click over a number. I still haven't worked out why. I spent a lot of time thinking about why that was so, and I still haven't quite worked it out. But I didn't want to party. I didn't want to kind of celebrate the fact that I was turning 30. But as it turned out, I had 2 functions to celebrate the 30th, and it was actually on the Sunday, which was my birthday, when I was with my family, that I was kind of like, actually, you know what, like, there's been a whole lot of things that have happened in the last 30 years, and there's been a whole lot of challenges, particularly for me personally over the last kind of 12, 18 months. But to kind of hit 30, I'd kind of accepted that it was okay. But yeah, it's pretty remarkable to think of some of those challenges that you just create, to be honest, in your mind, because, turning 30 has actually been pretty remarkable.
But being a time of reflection, and I often talk to people about their resilience and, how we stretch ourselves to get through moments. And, in the last 30 years, what you've described on air today, that you've not only just been on your own journey, but you've included a whole bunch of others in it.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is a huge responsibility.
Big response. It's what keeps you awake at night. How do you ensure that 16 people are fed,
Yes.
People have mortgages and loans and holidays and livelihoods that all rely on this business succeeding.
Yes.
That is what keeps you awake at night.
But like I said before, you do onboard people of a similar philosophy
right.
and I know your people are there for the business. They're not there just to have a job.
No.
They wanted something different, and they wanted to make a difference as well.
Right.
And that's what you're creating. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because I think Australians that get off their ass, take some risks, take some chances, and do the very best they can and be the best you. You're an amazing example of that.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now we'll catch up after the show, but in our last few minutes, vitamin D, I think, getting out in the sun. Do you get out in
Something
the sun
like that,
enough, Demetrio? Because it's true, your pituitary gland responds to sunlight. It makes you feel really good. So very important to get out into the sun. But more importantly, the show today, It's Okay to Not Be Okay, can sometimes bring out feelings for people, and you might need a little bit of extra support. And if you do, don't forget Lifeline 131114, suicide callback service 1300 659 467. And of course, if you're really worried about yourself or somebody else, 000. You're not going to go to jail by calling out somebody when you think they're in trouble. So you've been listening to Ray Bonney, where it really is okay to not be okay. And I've been joined by Demetrio Zima. He's the founder of Law Squared, Australia's most innovative law firm, driven to bring his vision to life and challenge the conventions of traditional law services. So remember, it's okay to not be okay. And by extending a little bit of kindness and care, you could be saving a life. So take care, everyone.